Choose your adventure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to tonight's Augusta Planning Board meeting. We just have 3 items on our agenda this evening, and all 3 are workshops, so we don't have anybody from the public in our audience. So with that, do I need to do anything more formal, or can we just begin?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Hi, Matt.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Let me move this up so that everybody can hear me.
Oops.
You have several to choose from, too.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah, there is a lot of.
We have a lot of mics tonight. You got a couple over there on the corner, and
I've got all kinds of mics if I need them. I guess I'm broadcasting to the world.
Anybody have, make sure you speak into the microphone,
no.
Bob.
No, it's only on yours.
Board, Chair, you've all received a memo from me that was in your packets, and I tried to answer the questions I think that were asked at the last planning board meeting during the last work session on May 12th, and to briefly summarize, I did have a conversation with Corporation Counsel. They took a look at the memo that I had put together, and his response was essentially summed up fairly simply in one sentence that I have in the middle of the first paragraph there, that the conditional use process, permit process relates to the suitability of the property for the use, while the licensing process relates to the qualifications of the operator. So that was his expectation of how the split would work between the process that would be undertaken by the planning board in the conditional use permit and the process that would be taken into consideration by the council during the licensing. And it's essentially the same process that's used for any sort of victualer's license, if there are restaurants, and a variety of other licenses that are issued by the city that also, in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, require conditional use permits for the use to exist. From the perspective of order, the conversation that we did have at the subcommittee level with the city council about that, which included conversations with potential licensees. We had a couple of the shelter operators here with us, talking to us. They felt that the conditional use permit process, as did Corporation Council, was more appropriate to go first. It typically required less, not as heavy a lift for them as the licensing process was going to require. And therefore, they felt that if they could get the details of the conditional use settled and nailed down, that it was an important first step in getting to their licensing process. They can still be filling out all the licensing application material and that sort of thing, but typically the license review would occur after the conditional use approval. The same thing occurs for most other licenses that work the same way. So I did include some draft language for you on the very last page of my memo, page 5. That would be some draft language for you to review. I also included, because the city of Lewiston came up at the last planning board meeting, Lewiston was sort of the model that we used in the subcommittee process with the city council, from both a process perspective, but also from a licensing perspective. We didn't look in great detail at their land use ordinance, but I did this last couple of weeks. And their conditional use process outlines 5 additional criteria, which I've given to you on page 4 of the memo, that they use in their conditional use review prior to the licensing process that occurs for them. So they use exactly the same process, a conditional use review. Shelters are conditional uses in all of the zoning districts where they're allowed in Lewiston, same as it would be here in Augusta. And then there would be a licensing process that goes in after the fact. So I certainly think it's appropriate if the planning board wants to discuss these criteria that Lewiston uses and see whether or not any of them might be important to add into Augusta's recommendation, your recommendation to the city council. the 5 items that I have listed on page 5 are the 5 that the city council subcommittee had initially thought might be important, but they'd certainly obviously welcome any additional comments from the council, from the planning board.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments out the gate? Yeah. Sorry.
I think it would be a good idea if we talked about the smoking areas, the designated smoking areas.
Yep.
That those be shielded from view.
Yep.
I think one thing that I find disconcerting going up Western Avenue is the recovery houses where you've got 5 or 6 guys just standing out front smoking. I think it's a,
Yeah.
it's a public image and an image of this population. So I think to the extent that you can give them more privacy, and I would look at it as more of a privacy issue.
If that's something that the board wants to add, I'm happy to, we can add that language for when it gets voted on by you folks.
It's funny that you brought that up, Kathy, because I have heard a similar comment from folks where they actually set up chairs out in front on the sidewalk and smoke, and it's very intimidating to,
People walking down the sidewalk.
and yeah, I think it
In
designated.
some of the locations, I think the reason for that, in some of the locations, the Leap? Oh, Link, the Link Center is over here on, right at the head of the bridge. That one, I believe, they don't allow smoking on site, and that's the reason for that. The shelters don't have that issue with not allowing smoking on site, but if you want it screened or in some location where it's less visible or not as prominent, that we can certainly add language, just simply that states, a designated smoking area shall be identified on the site plan and shielded from view.
Yes,
Excellent, because I think
Yes.
one of the last ones we had, they discussed the smoking areas
yes.
on that stuff. So I think it raises an issue to the neighbors in the backyards and everything too.
And I was the one that brought up the Lewiston Code, Matt, and I went back through and found it. And they have 10 items that are expectations. The 10th is good neighbor agreement, excuse me. And it is in that they specify what happens to someone when they leave and how big an area they require to be sort of overseen by the homeless shelter.
That's in their licensing ordinance, correct? Not in their land use ordinance.
Yes,
Right.
yes. But do we have that in our licensing ordinance? That's my concern. As long as
There
it's
is-
somewhere in there that we
I didn't bring
have
the licensing
expectations.
ordinance with me.
I think the
There is-
terminology is a little different
Right.
between Lewiston and Augusta.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as it's in there so that there is some
Yeah, there is a section in the license.
control for the people who live around there so that
It's
there will
attached
be
here.
some assurance that
My
it will be
apologies.
handled properly.
My memory is that it is included in there, but I would have to look to, I'll let you all ask me another question while I try and flip through and find it.
That was my only question.
While you're looking on that stuff, in the page 3 on the first paragraph, you stated, Matt, that in no conditional review, you're not aware of in your 20 years that the potential actions of the customer base as they travel to or from was used, examined by the planning board. That's false, because the last one we had, we were concerned because we were traveling to eat at a different place where they walk through the neighborhood to get to it on that thing.
A shelter,
Right,
Right.
Yeah, that was that low barrier shelter.
the shelter use.
right,
Right, and then they were going to walk over to the United
Spruce Street.
facility.
right.
Was that a condition, was that a reason specifically for denial?
No, I just wanted to point out, we do look at that, if they have something they're traveling to or from.
I would recommend not looking at that. That'd be my recommendation. It's because once a person does leave a site, generally it's not the responsibility of the business.
Because
After
they
they left.
stated that they, in fact, were having people hand
Walk through their
walked
yards.
over, they had people taking them there. So that's why we didn't issue anything, because they stated in their deal that they were doing that.
Except that they also said that they didn't do a head count or take names
Right.
or whatever, so people chose to start and then like off they could. So
okay.
again, it gets to the surrounding
Neighborhood
area, the
compatibility.
neighborhood compatibility, making people feel comfortable with what will happen if someone is expelled or if someone is belligerent or, those kinds of things.
Just wrote on myself, my apologies. I would I'd draw back to the issue of what neighborhood compatibility is. And neighborhood compatibility is primarily looking at the physical aspects of the site itself, as opposed to sort of a more generic, does this fit into the neighborhood? How do we feel about it? There's very specific language in the beginning of the neighborhood compatibility section that talks about the intent of the subsection is to encourage the applicant to design the proposal in consideration with the physical impact it will have on the immediate neighborhood. So it's talking very specifically about the design of the proposal and its physical impact on the neighborhood.
But that's your
Where-
language.
No,
That's-
that's actually in the ordinance.
Okay.
I've simply highlighted it
Right.
and underlined it.
But, go ahead, Matt.
But if that language that is in the ordinance really does focus in on what the physical aspects of the site are, not what's happening to the individuals who are coming for services at the site.
So are you suggesting that that might be a licensing requirement?
Yes, taking a look at those issues of how the operator is dealing with their clients is definitely going to be part of the licensing. There's going to be some level of limitation on that even in the licensing process that they have. And being able to like I say, control the actions of individuals after they've left the site.
But Matt, on the page 2, you list the other things beyond the definition of that. And if you read the opportunity for privacy, well, Kathy just addressed that with the whole smoking thing. But then the next one is, will the proposal maintain safe and healthful conditions?
Right.
How do you get to that without talking about what's going on? Or will it have a significant detrimental effect on the value of adjacent properties? Or will there be loitering of pedestrians? I mean, those are things that are in our purview under neighborhood
The
compatibility.
commentary that I've added in black to those is commentary that I actually copied and pasted from our city attorney. And those are his recommendations as to how you would review those items. This is typically, for the safe and healthful conditions, this would typically be looking at the design included to address pollution, solid waste features, how they're managing their garbage, how they're dealing with sewage management, and not things like littering. Certainly on the value of adjacent properties, there's language in there that would allow you to get the opinion of an appraiser, state certified appraiser, to make a determination for the board on that particular topic. So would not be something that's necessarily objective on your part. It would get an appraiser, have the business get an appraiser to make a determination as to whether or not it does have a negative or positive or no impact on the adjacent property values. So it's not something you have to guess at. You'd be relying on a professional to do that. And the last one, with respect to exterior queuing or loitering of pedestrians, again, Corporation Counsel indicated that was generally to talk about how pedestrians are moving on the site and moving onto and off of the site, same as vehicles, how vehicles are moving onto and off of the site, not what pedestrians are doing once they're 100 to 200 yards away.
So basically, the city attorney is telling us we're stepping over we're stepping out of our bounds.
I think what the attempt there is to simply define what it is exactly that the planning board is typically looking at when you're looking at conditional use review, and it's the physical aspects of the site. The licensing process is where you really look at how the site is being operated, and to the extent that you can look at how that site is, how that operator is interfacing with their clients, that's the licensing process, and that is absolutely where that will occur on this particular topic.
But the same effect of traveling from one place to another place through the neighborhood, walking to those things, would never show up in an appraisal, to my knowledge, that they would pick that up as being an entity. One, I think, so I think the appraisal part of it would never pick that up.
It feels to me like we're treating a type of use that requires licensing differently than we would a project where licensing isn't involved, with these suggested ways to divide, split the,
I'd suggest that the standards that the Corporation Council has suggested here that I've highlighted in the commentary would be applicable to any use, not just licensed uses.
But that's not how
it's
we've
contrary to how we've
That's not how
acted.
we've done in the past.
That's right. It is-
So
it is
we are
contrary.
stepping out of bounds is what they're.
I don't think we're stepping out of bounds. This
I
is
don't
just
either,
his
but
opinion.
we're saying the corporate council says you could be getting into areas you shouldn't be.
You could be, but doesn't mean you are.
And we have been for 21 years.
Right.
Certainly when I was, and I can only speak to the time that I was staff to the board, I don't recall the board discussing in detail how individuals who are clients of a particular business, how they were acting once they were off the site.
I beg to differ. Let's talk about the Kmart development and the people from Amherst Street who were worried about the cars parking on the road and the pedestrian traffic. That was all on a residential project. And we listened to it, and usually those types of concerns are going to come up from the public. It's not going to be staring
So
you
the
in the
question,
face.
the question at that point is just how is the street, how, are you going to have a sidewalk that's going to be able to handle people who walk to and from the site? Are there going to be parking spaces? Are there going to be dangerous traffic movements that you're talking about? You're not asking questions about whether or not the individuals are dangerous individuals or worrying individuals or
Not for that
concerning
particular
individuals.
project, but we've had shelter applications before where this has come up every time.
Shelter applications, I'm certain it may have, and I would suggest that it may need to be pulled back on shelter applications. That's an area that really.
So how do you suggest when you have 20 members of the public who are opposed to an application for conditional use all come up and talk about those particular issues?
It's not
Do we
unusual.
punt it?
What's that?
Do we punt it and say that will be regulated by licensing?
Well, in this particular case, I would say yes. You're not punting it. You're sending it to the appropriate body. Prior to there being a licensing process, it's certainly not unusual for someone to come before the board and speak to a topic that isn't really relevant to the board. You thank them for their input and move on. You can't
So we tell
necessarily
them
address
it's
every single.
irrelevant?
You-
It's
in
not
some
something we
cases-
consider?
In some cases, what
Because our standards are so generically written
Right.
that we can't parse it out just the way this attorney has laid them out here as examples of things.
Right, but what we then do, Matt,
Yeah.
and this has been so effective for many, many years, is that we have the applicant listen to the concerns.
Sure.
And then in the end, the chair always turns back to the applicant and says, can you address these concerns? And invariably, they do, and they make concessions, and they listen. And this is the only place where the
They can be
public
heard.
has a chance to be heard. We had that happen with the woman who was really upset about the Iron Man thing. And she said, I've talked to everybody in the city and nobody listens. I'm here because someone will listen. And that's part of what we do.
I would encourage you to continue to listen. Absolutely.
Another issue at the same point that where we've used it as an example before is nursing, daycare centers and stuff, and parking in front of people's driveways and sidewalks and everything else. That's been brought up in the past. We've had neighbors complaining about not too much traffic and how do the safety for their kids and stuff. So there's another example of stuff. So that's a different project, so they're asking us to handle it differently than these projects.
Well, I would say again, no, that's not being handled differently. These are with respect to traffic going to and from a daycare center. The question is, how does the traffic that is trying to get to the daycare center get there safely, move around safely on site, and then move away from the site? That's
Neighborhood
physical safety.
compatibility.
And again, that's, excuse me?
It's neighborhood compatibility.
It's physical design. It's not asking questions about the behavior of the individuals behind the wheel, and whether or not those individuals are acceptable individuals in the neighborhood. That's the challenge. I think that's a little bit different perhaps with this one, is because there's a population that a lot of people are concerned about, and they're concerned because of the actions that sometimes occur with those individuals, and that's understandable. But it's outside the purview of the planning board, which is looking at the physical characteristics of the site, and how the site is designed to be
In other words,
safe.
we can't go 1 foot off the site.
Excuse me?
We're there to give our opinion on that site and the site only, not when you step away from the site.
Assuming people can safely move to and from the site, yes, I would agree. If there's a concern because people are walking to the site and there's no sidewalk, sure, that's a concern. If that's how people typically get to the site, they're walking to the site and it's not safe to walk there, then it is something that would be of a concern to the planning board as to how these individuals are getting to and from the site. But if there's a sidewalk, the actions of the individuals or the appearance of the individuals or something about the individuals really isn't a concern of the planning board.
To me, an example is, and Kathy's right, we're being asked to look at two different projects in 2 different ways. It's basically what it boils down to. So what we need to do is we need to follow what the legal counsel is advising us that we should be doing on this type of thing.
But if you
But-
look at the language, it says typically. It doesn't say always. It doesn't say this is the rule.
Right.
It's not in the rules. It says interpretation that typically.
We can still ask the questions when they become to the board on what they intend and everything else, but it's the licensing who's going to make the decision on that particular aspect of it. I get, what we can't do is ask them to do different things in regard to that, if it's out of our purview to do that, other than an appraisal or something in that manner.
And the only thing I can do is give you the advice that the city attorney has given me, and that is, his advice is what he believes is the least likely to lose in a court challenge. That's what he's providing you with advice on. As I said, I certainly wouldn't discourage someone who came to speak to you with their concerns to say whatever it is they want to say. But there is a limit to the structure of what the planning board has authority over. There always has been.
Matt, who does the reviews for a license? Who would this be one person? Is it several people or what?
The licensing review board would do an initial review and pass that recommendation on to city council. So
Is that 5 people, 3 people?
The license review board is the police chief, the fire chief, code enforcement, the city engineer, and the city clerk.
Okay. I like the 5
They
people.
would provide advice. They would provide advice to the city council. The city council would actually be doing the final review and issuing the license. The licensing review board would only be giving their advice to the council.
I would like to make the suggestion that the attorney give us suggested language for revisions to our rules that make it clear what rules we're supposed to follow rather than generally and typically. I don't think it's fair for us to have to decide on this application, maybe not on this application, or what does generally mean? It's not clear enough for me.
Counterpoint, I hate it when you restrict and we don't have any options, the different things. To me, that leaves off where we can actually go into certain areas on doing that stuff. I like general statements in certain areas because it gives us a chance to dive into things.
But he's saying,
He's saying don't.
doesn't want you to dive into them.
We can still ask the questions.
So if you got answers that you weren't satisfied with and you wanted to put conditions on a project that related to that,
No,
Are we
but
then out of bounds?
I would hope that the licensing board and the license review board is paying attention to what we're saying.
apply it to something that's not licensed. I mean,
No.
if you're going to have a different rule for a project that is going to have licensing on the back end, then our rules need to be more clear about what generally and typically look like.
Thank you. I also want to hear from some other people on the board too, in case some.
I'm
people
sorry.
have an opinion.
Let's say
Yeah,
just
go ahead, Betsy.
1 second, like for Kathy's comment, what sort of things could the board do as part of a project review to pass on their thoughts about the project to Corporation Council? Because it wouldn't be like.
During the licensing
like it
process,
wouldn't-
you mean?
No, as if they reviewed a project, say, and they approve it,
Mm-hmm.
or deny it, I suppose, like what could they pass, how could they pass information on to the council for their licensing process, I guess? So, because you wouldn't be adding a condition, you wouldn't be maybe doing a finding, would it just be a separate recommendation?
Right.
You know, like how can they provide that information?
Well, first, if the planning board denied the application, I would say at that point it's dead.
Well, it
There's an
could go
appeals
to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get automatically approved, and
There's-
then they go to licensing,
It's not going to go, it's not going to go to licensing before it gets approved, though, from a land use
or
perspective.
the BZA could approve it, yeah.
Yeah, no, but until it gets approved as a land use, it's not going to go to the city council for a license. So I don't think there's anything that would be necessary with respect to that. Certainly if the board, I can pretty much guarantee you that there will be council members present, or at least watching the planning board during any sort of conditional use permit approval. But it certainly is appropriate for the planning board to pass on its thoughts to the city council if it wants to. I'd like to have a conversation with Corporation Council on that, though, to make sure that I have a clear understanding of exactly what might or might not be out of bounds for the planning board, particularly since their decision is appealable. And so any comments made outside the actual review process and the approval letter could have an impact on an appeal. So there's a question there, and I'd like to have a conversation with Corporation Council on that before I give a full answer on that. It would be challenging for the planning board to make a set of comments that aren't part of its actual finding. And then how do you deal with that if it gets appealed? How does that affect an appeal?
I guess, having read the good neighbor agreement that has been presented to us by a variety of different people through the years, to me, it isn't enough.
It's what?
It isn't enough. It isn't. Let me just read this to you. I'm sure not all of you have seen it. Evidence of an adopted good neighbor agreement that establishes a policy for how guests will be respectful of neighbors, including area residents and businesses, whereby guests at the shelter agree to abide by the policy and are held accountable for their failure to do so within a 1,320-foot radius of the premises. Under such a policy, guests are held to account for complaints received by neighbors resulting from the guest's failure to abide by the policy. And if disturbances are not minimized, then the guest may be declined further service. I think that gives some teeth or some hope or some encouragement to the surrounding neighborhood that there will be attention paid, because this is a different population. It needs different services.
Harold, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Well, in reading Letter C says, will the proposal maintain safe and healthy conditions within the neighborhood? And then below that, it says solid waste management features sewage management, not things like littering. So maintain safe and healthy conditions within the neighborhood. So Link over here across the street has cigarette butts, has milk cartons to sit on, has litter, whatever. So are we not able to look at the health and safety conditions of the neighborhood? I mean, you just said that when they leave that building, they're not responsible. So who is responsible for that area?
That's
City
public,
property.
that's public property.
So who's
Do you mean
responsible?
the Link folks? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, or anybody, like over here where we're gonna have this low barrier, and you go across the street and you dispense needles, and you have trash, and you have cigarette butts, and this and that, it's not on their property, but who's responsible for that?
The individuals
So
creating
you're,
the problem.
you're still in that neighborhood.
Right.
That's not healthy. That's not clean.
So who do the neighbors
So
call?
can we put
The police.
some type of condition that, like she said, you have to maintain 1,000 feet around your building. You have to maintain that. It only makes sense to me.
Me too.
Because if you're gonna say you can go across the street and you can do whatever you want, and there's nothing that business or whatever can do about it.
If the planning board would like to add a conditional use approval that requires the applicants to present this type of plan to the planning board, you can certainly make that recommendation to the city council.
I would say make that recommendation.
Yeah.
Because otherwise than that, you're just gonna have trash and,
Going to have unhappy neighbors.
Yes, you're going to have unhappy neighbors.
so that's neighborhood compatibility again.
Correct.
It's like
Correct.
walking through, if I had a house there and you're walking from the clinic, I'll call it, over to whatever, the drugstore or this store, and you're continually going through that property,
Yeah.
what am I as a homeowner to do about that?
The only thing I found in our license, I did find it, Matt,
I know we're getting into the nitty gritty, but
That's what we're
I'm
here for.
also looking at the neighborhoods themselves and the taxpayers to try to protect them
Correct.
from all this baloney that's going on.
Yeah,
I just saw something on Facebook up in Bangor, where there's a playground, and there's needles on the kids' equipment that are left there.
That is absolutely going to be part of the licensing review process.
what I see here, Matt, is on page 4 of the license that you gave us, I believe. And the only reference that I see is processes governing communications with neighboring property owners and addressing neighborhood concerns
Correct.
is here under homeless shelter, under copy of adopted operations plan. That's the only thing that I see about neighborhood compatibility there.
Correct. That is something that that is the language that the city council subcommittee and the shelters worked together on, mostly the city council subcommittee
It's incomplete.
and corporation council.
My concern is that there's a cart and a horse, and the land use piece has to address some of those before it even gets to licensing, I believe, in order to decide whether to approve it or not.
I can have corporation council come and talk to you if you'd like.
Yeah.
That'd be fine. I mean, I was hoping that I would be able to provide the answers, but I'm clearly not able to provide the answers the board is looking for. So I will happily bring corporation council if you'd like.
Harold?
One more with shelters, side and rear setback from property lines. Is that the norm, 50 feet?
No, that's more.
That is,
That's substantially more than is required by any other land use.
Usually it's 25.
It's usually, in some cases, in some cases it's 5, in some cases it's none. It depends on the zone you're in.
Is it it possible to extend that from 50 to 100 feet, 75 feet?
You can make,
We can make a
you can make a
recommendation.
recommendation for that if you'd like, absolutely.
Because me as a homeowner, then all of a sudden, this comes into my neighborhood, or 50 feet from my house. And it says,
What the council subcommittee was attempting to do with that number was not create a situation where you could not have one of these anywhere in the city by virtue of the fact that you've zoned them out because there's no room where you can get 50 feet away from anything. They did take a look initially at wider setbacks. They initially looked at 250. They initially looked, and then they went down to 100. And the problem with those was that you created a situation where there were, initially with 250, there was no place in the built-up area of the city where you could be that distance away on all sides to actually have one of these uses exist or occur. So you'd be zoning them out of existence, which violates state law.
So that's a good point.
So the 50 feet was the compromise that the council subcommittee came up with based on something that they felt was a reasonable distance, but didn't essentially prohibit the use in the built-up part of the city.
I will say too that sometimes right in the section, right after all the conditional uses listed in the ordinance, it says such conditions that may be added could include increased setbacks and yards. So I think if you were in a situation where maybe one of the neighbors was more sensitive,
Right.
then you could say potentially, we want to have a 100-foot setback in this location. So I think.
Case-by-case basis.
Yeah, the planning board has that
I think
flexibility.
I agree. I think there's room for
So-
that. I think 50 is what a minimum was that was put in.
So that is only on new construction?
No, it was for existing buildings as well. So if you had an existing building and the use was going into an existing building, it couldn't be closer than 50 feet from, that building couldn't be closer than 50 feet from the adjacent use or the adjacent, from the property line.
I think maybe in that instance, when it's an existing building, maybe then there's other things the planning board would consider, like, could we add, I mean, maybe it is an 8-foot-high fence instead of a typical 6-foot-high, something like that would help mitigate that situation. So the planning board could look at those to add conditions.
The setback issue on this one in particular as well was, as I recall, I'd have to take a look at the licensing standard, but my recollection on the licensing standard was that, or on this one, was that it didn't apply to existing. I don't have the language right in front of me.
I think you're right.
Was that it was
think
not
you're right.
supposed to apply to
Yeah.
existing.
Not supposed to.
Yeah, and the reason, there's a very specific reason for that. The existing shelters wouldn't comply. They're less than 50 feet away from their neighbors now, up at Bread of Life.
Right, exactly. So let me just clarify on your May 7th, 2026 memo to us. You said that we are allowing shelters as a conditional use in the Riggsbrook Village, Rural River 2, Medical, and Kennebec locks. That's it?
Those are in
In
addition,
addition.
those are in addition to the existing ones already. These would be new locations, not the only locations.
Okay.
so can we make that recommendation that to be at least 75 feet away?
I guess I want to be sensitive to the comment that you made that was 50 determined just to not be exclusive, so we don't
Right.
get into any lawful things, and we can assess on a case-by-case basis
Right.
other conditions like potentially 75 feet or fencing or other alternatives depending on the site that came up. Hate to adjust language and then get in a pickle and then
Yep.
amend it back. Okay.
Right.
So, in reading this Lewiston thing here, outdoor spaces, adequate outdoor space to accommodate the shelter capacity without crowding has been provided on site and regarding layout. Adequate space is at the discretion of the board, but is recommended to be at least 50 square feet per occupant. So you have a building and you have 25 patients in there. in the city here, you're gonna be able to have 50 square feet per occupant? Like we were talking about over here on, by the hospital. There's no way that you could have had 50 square feet of outdoor space per occupant.
But an applicant, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, would propose a site that could accommodate the caseload that they are choosing for that site. Licensing will permit if they've met those expectations. So they shouldn't come to us with an overprojection of space if they'd just be denied it. Okay.
Right. Right. I mean, the site that was proposed didn't have that as a condition that they were looking at. That was not something that was part of their standards that they were interested in. It's not something that's part of the proposed standards here. If you want to add it, you certainly could. This one, as you said, in Lewiston, it does say that adequate space is at the discretion of the board, but it's recommended to be 50 feet per occupant. So that's, if you wanted to add that one, I suggest adding it.
So just like Link across the river over here, that's why they're all over there in that little triangle.
Link operates differently. It's not a shelter. It's not a place where people go to stay. It's a place where people go to get services. So that one of their requirements is that there's no smoking on site. So that's why people leave the site so that they can smoke. That's why you see them off the property and out in the public on the sidewalk, is because they're looking for a place to smoke because they can't smoke on site.
So not a comparable example.
That's not something that would be a problem with this one.
So basically, the planning board is the judicial portion of the government of the city on this, with the land ordinances on that stuff. We're not the rule makers on that thing and everything else. So we're just here to state, yes, it meets the ordinances, or it meets it with our boundaries that we're allowed to take in that decision, correct?
Once the ordinance is adopted, yes.
Because we don't
This
make
process
the
right
laws,
now-
we don't make the ordinances.
Yeah, no, this process right now, though, is is your opportunity to make a recommendation to city
Right.
council as to what the rules will be. And then the city council will actually adopt what they're going to adopt, whatever that ends up being. And then you're right, at that point, when the rules are established and the rules are in place, then you're a judicial body, a quasi-judicial body that makes judgments.
So basically, I don't know if anybody else was, I know Kathy, don't speak for you, but I thought it's all you nodded head. Have the attorney come to answer some of the legal questions for us on what our boundaries and everything is. I think would be very helpful to me to make sure we got, because I don't want us wasting time, I don't want cities wasting time, I don't want the licensing board wasting time if we're all asking different things and we're not allowed to ask the other things. Explain to us, right? So I think it would be beneficial.
Kevin, would you like to add anything? Sorry to put you on the spot, but you haven't had an opportunity to speak, and if you don't want to, it's okay, but.
I have a lot of the same thoughts as everyone else. It does seem like there's some question of where there would be overlap between what we do versus city council and where exactly that line does cross. So I think it would be good to hear from an attorney to actually see
Sure.
where are we supposed to stop asking questions.
Well, and I feel like additionally, that seems to be kind of our position here. I think that that's the pickle we're going to get in each time someone proposes this, because we're going to hear stuff from the public. And we're not going to just ignore that and say that's for the next meeting that you can go to in 2 weeks. So I think that knowing that it is a pretty spicy conversation historically when it's come here, yes, we're going to hear everybody out, but we are looking at land use, but we also want to be thoughtful of the neighbors. I mean, we've even do this with, CMP projects. If it doesn't fit a neighborhood, then we talk about that. So maybe added language for us to know that, say we don't hear what the public says because we know the next shop gets to address it. How do we still keep our reputation, our ethics feeling in check, and not passing it to the next shop for hopefully they will address it in good fashion, since it isn't our responsibility to do certain things. Too many words, but I think you get the upshot.
No, I completely understand. I completely understand. And it'd be, I think, like you say, it's important to get that read from Corporation Counsel so that you all have it. Like I said, I've given you my best shot as to the way I see it split, and I'm happy to have Corporation Counsel give you their best shot.
Yeah, and I think that that's really good too, because, I mean, reading this, it looks like it's very thoughtfully done. You know, everybody, put in enough words to not make it too restrictive and gave enough options for conversation to happen. And I'd hate to kind of go round and round and round, but some of the points that came up the first time still seem to come up this next time.
Yep.
And I think that there is hesitation to want to make a final decision on something that is so spicy to communities. So I guess we'll just continue to take our time.
Yeah, I would just be really disappointed to have the public feel they no longer had a voice. They no longer had someplace that could listen to them in the same way that we do.
The CMP project was a good example.
Yeah.
Well, I would be remiss in saying that they no longer have a voice, because that voice just would be happening in a different location for those particular issues. They'd have a voice on the land use issue here. They'd have a voice on the licensing and operational issue at the city council. So the public would absolutely still have a voice. It's just a question of, I guess, where do you make that cut? Where do you make that cut? And I like I said, I attempted to make that cut for you today, and obviously it's been unsatisfactory, but that's fine.
No, it's satisfactory. We just want an S plus. Yeah.
Unconvincing. How about that for a word?
Just to restate what Matt just said, same thing, we tell the public when they come to a workshop, everything else, and they come to the public hearing, once we get to that, folks, we're just a stepping stone. We will hear you here, and you can go voice your opinion when it comes before the city council, because they're the ones that give the final. So I agree with Matt on that thing. There's many ways for them to voice their opinion, but in certain ways, that is not truly there when they're actually hearing an agenda item, project, because it usually stops with us. It doesn't go to the city council in regards to that type of stuff,
So again, it might bring back the difference between licensing versus non-licensing.
Yeah.
And maybe that would be helpful to have that distinction.
And maybe some of us older folks are too set in our ways.
I would like to think that there's going to be some healthy overlap between the two, because some of these issues may not come up to licensing necessarily the way they would to the planning board. And to the extent that it's reflected in the record for the project that comes before the planning board and what the planning board's final decision is, I think the final decision is illustrative of what our authority and power is. But I don't think there's a bright line, and I don't think there should be a bright line. I think it would discourage conversation.
So the outcome of this workshop is that we will
Have another
schedule it
workshop.
again.
That sounds like it is, yes.
Yeah,
I will schedule Corporation Council to be at the next one.
okay. Thank you.
All
To
right?
say, I will say, I did, knowing that this is something that sort of is on a list of things to move along and come to a resolution on. I did advertise this as a public hearing in 2 weeks, but I will modify that. I mean, I suppose it could still be a public hearing.
It could still.
And then we'd have public comment as well, and you can either make a decision or not at that meeting. I mean, we
Well,
could,
that seems like it would be a really nice idea, because whoever's watching and in tune to this topic hopefully would come to that public hearing, and maybe whatever comes of that public dialogue may help us continue to deliberate before we schedule corporates.
Sure.
I mean,
they could, yeah, Corporation Council could be there too, or I don't know, either way.
At the public hearing?
well,
Oh,
maybe that-
absolutely. No, we'll have Corporation Council here for the next meeting. I can almost guarantee there's city councilors watching tonight. as I know they were last time. So they may come as well and express their comments to you as well. I'm not sure. So if Corporation Counsel is here, though, Corporation Counsel certainly will be able to answer some of your questions.
And the other thing, we can always have a second public hearing. We don't just have
Right.
to have one.
Exactly, yeah, you could.
Oh, yeah, no,
definitely-
yeah. I mean, just because it's a public hearing, I mean, you can essentially run a public hearing like a workshop, just the public gets to speak.
That sounds like a
Okay,
good plan.
good.
Does everyone feel like their input was heard on that?
Yes.
All right, so all things considered for the next scheduled topic. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Okay. So the next item was a workshop. It's text amendments to the land use ordinance regarding daycare centers and childcare facilities to comply with state law. This is actually,
You are in good hands. I'm going to move
This one
on.
is more.
you don't want to stay?
Thank you very much.
I leave you in the capable hands of my staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are they directing that to me again?
They could be.
So I should have said I'm Betsy Poole, the city planner, for those who are watching. So anyway, I provided you all with a memo, and I posted this online as well, with some information. So in 2025, some state law changes were made. It added childcare for services in residential areas. And then the LD 2173, we'll call it the Fix-It bill that came through, which is a lot about housing, but also included some about these childcare centers. We call them daycare centers in our ordinance. Made some modifications. So what I've provided here to the board is some of that information. So I have the state law that was added in 2025, and then in it, the language is bold in your memo here. And instead of having to cross-reference back to some other document, I just clipped out the definitions of what a child care facility is, what a child care center is, nursery school, and in this, I sort of updated the state law to have those new changes that just were voted in this year. So you can see what all that language is. And basically, the location of a child care facility or a family care provider must be a permitted use in a municipal area that is zoned for residential purposes. A family child care provider or small child care facility located in an area zoned for residential purposes must be subject to the same zoning requirements as a single-family dwelling unit. So single family is allowed everywhere, so now childcare centers, daycares are allowed everywhere. Obviously, if a new construction is being built, it would still have the development review standard. So if it's disturbing more than 10,000 square feet, it would come to the planning board for that. And so I've outlined some changes in here to definitions that are in our land use ordinance, and also changing the land use chart. So it would change, the daycare centers now are conditional use in some locations. It would change it to a permitted use in all districts but the industrial district and government services. As we're going to be talking about housing later, I was thinking we might want to remove residential from the industrial district. Right now, it's allowed, which sort of just doesn't, not necessarily compatible uses, I guess. Especially since residential is allowed everywhere now. And then updating parking. The other big thing in this is right now we have home occupation licenses for daycares, which would be like a 12 and under size in a neighborhood. So because these facilities would need to be treated the same as a single-family home, we couldn't do the home occupation license for that. Obviously, all these facilities would still require the state licensing as well. Setbacks would remain unchanged from cannabis businesses, sexual-oriented businesses, and shelters, whatever that language would be. So I have some language in here, red lines, green lines, for the board to consider.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So if I'm looking at the section on home occupation. A residential home could have up to 12 kids. They're probably going to put in playground equipment and things for outside activities and whatnot. I'm not sure if you had a home occupation with 12 kids, you could do that with one person, one extra person, and still adequately supervise the kids.
That would be up to the state's licensing.
Pardon?
The state licensing standards. I mean, they have certain numbers of staff ratios.
Right, but we say it operates with no more than one person other than family members residing in the home. E, under home occupation.
Well, daycares would not be a home occupation anymore, because if you go down to 30521, a
Okay,
few
I'm
lines
sorry.
below, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep,
Okay, I missed that too. Thanks.
yep.
I just wanted to confirm my understanding of something here. So when you're moving the nursery school under daycare, is that more of just like a simplification of the ordinance or?
Yeah, I was realizing that our definition for nursery school was different, quite different from the state definition. And really what we did is we said that the nursery school, it referred back to, in our ordinance, daycare center for any land use. So like you'd look on the land use chart and see where it's allowed. So, and that's where the licensing is. So it was just sort of basically too many land uses. I know I think it's state licensing, you know, it would be licensed different, but for how we'd be looking at it for land use, we just consider it a daycare center.
Just want to ask a quick question, if I could. Under the definition of daycare center, it says for children or adults. So how much of this that we're reading pertains to places that serve adults as well?
At the state, I don't know what state,
I'm looking
Yeah.
at the definition on page 3
Right.
of daycare center where it says 12 children or adults.
yep.
So this isn't just childcare.
Our ordinance is more expansive than the state. So we allow, well, we consider it for adults or children, any age, could be a daycare center.
So do they license day services for adults?
I don't know.
Dementia.
I'm trying to remember what I used to do.
I'd say for a day use, I'm not 100% sure.
Because then it goes on to say services may include child daycare, nursery school, preschool, non-medical, home care, or homemaker services.
No, it's pretty broad.
Yeah. Group support, companionship.
I didn't get into the weeds on modifying that.
Yeah, I see that.
It kind of had a lot of information. I wasn't 100% sure what the implications would be of changing a definition that we've had in the ordinance for a really long time. And say I could find out more if you want me to pursue it.
I'm just trying to think of like programs like Creative Works is going to pull in under this definition.
But they're already in
They're
that
already there
definition right
now,
now.
yeah.
The only thing that was added was nursery school to eliminate that definition.
Yeah.
So they're already in that now.
Yeah, because right now, the nursery school, preschool, say, definition, like the last sentence, it says, for the purposes of this chapter, a nursery school shall be viewed as a daycare center. So,
For
So I
future
just-
discussion.
suck it up, yeah.
When we're bored, right?
Pardon?
When we're bored, we'll revisit that particular topic. Yeah, Bob?
I'm satisfied with what Betsy has approved here and put it down. I would have no problem moving this to a public workshop.
I second it.
All in favor? Or any discussion? All in favor? Looks like a discussion. All right. Thank you.
Okay, and then the last item on the agenda was just a workshop for the amendments for housing to comply with state law. This is basically no new news for anything. I gave you all the 2173 language that was officially voted on, so now it's stopped being a moving target. The changes that we already discussed about subdivision definition, unchanged. We could just move that forward to you to council if you want. And the ADU changes, we had discussed at that workshop that maybe the city is fine with having an ADU on anywhere residential is allowed. Basically, an ADU would just be a unit that could be allowed if the density doesn't, there's a restriction for density or size of the lot, that sort of thing. So the thought was that even if you have an 8-unit building, you can add an ADU to it. Just the city wants more housing. We're fine with having that additional ADU. We don't care that it's a 1-family, a 2-family, or a 3-family, because that was what the new law changed, that it would be 1, 2, or 3-family were the only ones that could have an ADU. So I guess the question is the board still supportive of having an ADU anywhere residential uses on a property?
Is it restricted where certain areas restrict that type of thing? Certain subdivisions?
Well,
if there's
that's the same as it always is. If
Right.
there's deed restrictions, those would still apply and be enforced by whoever has the authority to enforce those. It's not codes.
I did have a question about what you drafted here, where the definition of subdivision changes to 5 or more dwelling units, up from 3.
Yeah.
Elsewhere in the document, it still refers to 3. Was that supposed to change to 5 every place?
So there's a difference between lots and dwellings. So it's still 3 lots. So a land division remains the same.
Okay.
Yes, which is a little confusing, yes.
I did get confused.
Yeah, yeah. Because at first, I mean, even I thought, I said, oh, it's everything, it's just easy, 3 to 5. And then it's like, oh, no, it's just structures.
Betsy, do you know, can a camper trailer or Winnebago, whatever they're called, be considered an ADU if it's parked? Can it stay there forever?
No.
It has to be connected to sewer and water and everything.
Yeah, a
Same standards as a
recreational
dwelling unit.
vehicle cannot be considered a dwelling.
Know what you're talking about.
Very strange. There's ones that's appeared on the side of,
We're aware, yes.
Third
It's under, yes. Codes is very aware, working on that, yes.
good, well, it just suddenly popped up one day, and it's in this horrible position.
I will say
Does
one
anyone
thing.
have any other deep comments on,
I would like to make the comment that I'm glad it's city staff who interpret this.
Oh, it's painful. I'd say, wait till you see the next stuff I bring you. It's a treat.
Great.
I said, well, we'll get this easy one out of the way, just keep our conversations going, and then we'll be talking about growth areas and sewer and water and density.
Again, I have no problem recommending that this goes to public workshop.
Yep,
I second.
any discussion?
Yep.
All in favor? All right.
Good work,
Very
Betsy.
good.
3 public hearings coming up. One with corporate counsel.
Now, the meeting minutes. Did anybody, yep, go ahead, Kathy.
On page 7, about 2/3 of the way down, Matt says if the circumstances of the site are unique, it should be then instead of than. No, that's a little picky, but I think I had one other one too. On page 11, where Emily's speaking, the second line, with the opportunity to keep the balk, is that supposed to be back half? I think it's supposed to be back.
Yes.
I think that's all I had.
Oh, yeah, good one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even see that. Yeah, good, thank
all
you.
right.
Thank you for helping me speak.
My little technical.
Any other edits, observations? Motion?
I move we accept the minutes as amended.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Very good.
Nate didn't vote.
He wasn't here,
wasn't
though.
here.
It's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Not that I was paying attention.
All right, and Harold, we have one more.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Very good. Thanks, everybody.